Hey, what's going on, Who That Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones. And yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. Hope everybody is being safe out there. Hope everybody is staying warm. And hope everybody had a great weekend. We now know who is going to represent the NFC and the AFC in the Super Bowl. Hope everybody enjoyed Conference Championship weekend. Had some very interesting games. Both games that were played, I mean, it really just came down to the end of the game. So shouts out to all four teams laying it all out there and trying to get themselves into the Super Bowl. But, of course, only two teams can make it. So congratulations to the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks that will be playing in Super Bowl 60. But we will be talking about Conference Championship weekend, but in a different way, man. We're going to be talking a little bit about Denver Broncos head coach Sean Payton. Now, of course, if you watch the game or if you have been following sports, you know that the Denver Broncos lost at home in Denver to the New England Patriots 10-7 in the AFC Championship game. And, of course, you had some questionable decisions by head coach Sean Payton. But, you know, you had some Saints fans out there that had some things to say about Sean Payton. You had some Saints fans that were upset that Sean Payton lost, didn't want to see him lose. You have some Saints fans that were on the other end of that coin that was kind of happy that Sean Payton lost the game. And that's what we're going to be talking about, man. We're going to be discussing, are you upset as a Saints fan that Sean Payton lost the AFC Championship game? Are you happy? Because I can understand it from both ways, right? You have a nice sample size of Saints fans out there that are resentful towards Sean Payton, despite the fact that Sean Payton gave the New Orleans Saints more prosperity than they have ever had in the entire franchise's existence. You still have Saints fans that are upset about the whole press conference, and some feel that Sean Payton left the team when they needed him the most. You had Drew Brees retiring from the NFL, and there was a lot of uncertainty about the New Orleans Saints at the time. Of course, the salary cap issues, and nobody wanted to see the Saints in the situation that they have been in over the last 4 to 5 seasons. But, Sean Payton decided to step down, was in television for a year before he decided to, come back into coaching. Of course, we know that the New Orleans Saints had to make a trade with the Denver Broncos in order for Sean Payton to become the head coach of the Broncos. But some people felt like Sean Payton finessed his way out of town, and they have not forgiven him for that. Then, of course, you have Saints fans that are excited about the new chapter and understand that all things must come to an end, and they are appreciative of what Sean Payton has done in New Orleans, but understand that Sean Payton wanted to take on new challenges, which I don't have an issue with at all. Look, regardless of how you may feel about Sean Payton, regardless to if you think that he is the biggest villain on this side of Thanos, the reality is Sean Payton is the reason why we, as Saints fans, as onlookers, as reporters, etc., have an appreciation for the New Orleans Saints. He is one of the main reasons why the New Orleans Saints were relevant in a lot of you's lifetime. Because when I was growing up, before Sean Payton got to the Saints, I can tell you, not many people were talking about the Saints other than individuals that stayed in New Orleans or in the Gulf Coast region, because the New Orleans Saints were in a quiet taste at the time. I mean, not much winning was going on, and not many ticket sales were happening. I mean, you had to really love the New Orleans Saints during the 90s when I was growing up in order for you to sit your behind in the Superdome knowing good and god doggone well that the New Orleans Saints more than likely was going to lose the football game. But at the end of the day, Sean Payton came in 2006, and in his first year took the Saints further than they have ever been when it comes to the playoffs, and that is the NFC Championship game. Then, of course, we know alongside Drew Brees for 15 to 16 years, the New Orleans Saints were one of the most relevant franchises, and not just the NFC, but the entire NFL. So for that, I'm always going to be appreciative of Sean Payton. Look, the reality is this. If you live long, you can become the hero. But if you live a little longer, you're going to live long enough to become the villain. Sean Payton was in his early 40s when he was hired by Mickey Loomis and Tom Benson, the late Tom Benson, to coach the Saints. As of right now, Sean Payton is 62 years old. And like I said, he lived long enough to be the villain. Now, some people have their reservations about Sean Payton. I am not going to just sit up here and just disrespect Sean Payton as if he did absolutely nothing, because the reality is the entitlement of some of these Saints fans out here that's really going at Sean Payton. They don't even realize that the reason why you feel so strongly about how he left the team was because he gave you a reason to. He gave you a reason to care about the New Orleans Saints. He gave you a reason to love this football team and feel as if the New Orleans Saints could win every single game, every single week when he was the head coach and when when Drew Brees was the quarterback. So in some ways, that feeling that you have, he instilled inside of you. So with that, I'm appreciative of Sean Payton. And I will always have love for Sean Payton for what he did for the New Orleans Saints organization. Now, with that being said, is there like a small, little micro bit of, do I feel a certain type of way about him losing? Look, if I was to take off my fandom, right? If I were just to take off my fandom and just be as, impartial as possible, nah, I don't care. But at the same time, like, it's like you don't want to see your ex doing better than you. You know what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to see them shining better than, like, brighter than you. Like, you don't want to see that, right? So a part of me is like, like, at least let the Saints get there first, and then all of a sudden, like, if Sean want to go back with Bo Nix, hey, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, Sean Payton is a really good coach. It was an unfortunate situation. You lose your starting quarterback in Bo Nix. He's out for the season. In comes Jarrett Stidham. And I mean, it was just a match made in hell, if you ask me. He was going up against a team that drafted him, offensive coordinator that understood his tendencies inside and out. And it was just a recipe for disaster. But I think a lot of people were looking at what happened in the second quarter when it was 4th and 1. The Denver Broncos were up 7-0, and they had an opportunity to kick a field goal, which, the way that Will Lutz was kicking on that afternoon makes you wonder if he would have made the field goal in the first place. But at that time, the weather was pretty fair, right? And this was before the big blizzard came in and you couldn't even see the field. So I was just kind of shocked that Sean Payton didn't take the points, because we know that Sean Payton is extremely meticulous about everything. Like, we hear about all these stories about how he was so instrumental at the towels that would lay across the seats of fans, so the way they could actually look as they wave them in the air. Like, he is that meticulous. So that Sean Payton was looking at the weather report. That Sean Payton, was talking to the equipment manager about the right cleats during a snowstorm and this, that, and the third. So I was actually shocked. I think that his eyes got a little bit bigger than his belly in that case. And I just think that he should have took the points. And I don't understand what the heck is going on in modern day NFL today, where coaches just don't want to take the points. Like, if you're down there on the goal line, right, and you have an opportunity to go up by 2 scores, your defense looking like something, it seems like it's going to be a day where the defense is going to be able to attack and hunt this, that, and the third. Why are you out here trying to make things harder than what they have to be? I mean, I understand that you have a younger generation of coaches now. They're in their 30s. They're trying to relate to the players. Some of them are former players. and they grew up playing Madden where you don't punt, right? When you're going up against your homeboy, your homegirl, you don't punt in Madden, right? It can be 4th and 23. We going for it. We going all streaks, all fours, right? We just throwing streak routes straight down the field, and we going to throw that 50-50 ball up there. But when you are in a game, right, and every decision that you make could cost you, or, it can help you make the big game, you have to make sure that you're making the best decisions. And people love analytics, and I can understand, technology reigns supreme. And in many cases, technology does help when it comes to making decisions. But sometimes you just got to trust your gut and take the doggone points. Because if they would have took the points in the second quarter, the way that the game transpired, then we're talking about a 10-10 ball game going into the fourth quarter in inclement weather, and whoever gets down there to be able to drive the ball into the end zone ends up winning the game. The weather ended up costing the Denver Broncos in the end. But Sean Payton and his decision-making ended up costing them before the weather even got there, to a point where it was just so hard and unbearable to even play in those type of conditions. So, but at the end of the day, this is another loss in a championship game for Sean Payton. And some people are asking, is Sean Payton snake bit? I don't think so. It just happens that way sometimes, man. It's just unfortunate situations that happen. And it was just one of those days, man. But a really good season by the Denver Broncos. Have no animosity, and I don't feel like anybody should have any animosity towards Sean Payton. Sean Payton has done so many great things in the city of New Orleans and brought credibility to the franchise. A franchise that was snake bitten in his own right, and the Saints fans out there want that type of legitimacy that Sean Payton brought to the Saints. That's the whole reason why you want it, is because of what Sean Payton gave to this football team. But let me go ahead and read some of your comments here. Thank you for being here. Got 74 people as of right now, and we have more rolling in. This is a very interactive podcast. For those that don't know, my name is TJ Jones, host here of the State of the Saints podcast. Been doing this podcast since 2018, over 2,000 episodes here on the State of the Saints podcast channel and so many other streaming platforms. So I really do appreciate you for stopping by. Hit that like button if you love the show, if you're liking what you're hearing. Make sure that you hit the like button if you are a regular to the State of the Saints podcast. Help the channel to grow. I really appreciate that. But I'm going to go ahead and get started, read some of these comments here. Jared says, I'm glad Peyton and Allen lost in 1 week. Well, like I said, man, a lot of people have some bitterness towards Sean Payton. I mean, I just don't, man. I don't. I feel like Sean Payton made the best decision that was for him. And, Sean Payton couldn't do anything but become a villain in New Orleans. Like, he already gave everything that he had, to the city for the most part. Like, he gave the city wins. He gave the franchise legitimacy. Like, if he would have stayed long enough, then people would have been sitting up here, being upset and talking about, man, maybe we need to get a little younger. Like, you can stay too long sometimes, right? So everybody wants a lifer. Everybody wants one of those situations that Pittsburgh has been in, right? Since 1968, they only had like 3 coaches in their entire franchise's history: Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin. And now they're hiring Mike McCarthy. So you had 4 coaches, right, in a nearly 60-year span. That is insane. That is insane to have that type of prosperity at the head coaching position. But it doesn't work that way all the time. And like I said, I don't have an issue with Sean. Like, the only thing he could have done was coach to a point where people were just frustrated and, tired of being on the outside looking in. Kind of like a Sean McDermott situation. Like, yeah, you getting us to the meeting, but you can't close the deal. And that becomes frustrating over time. Like, you got the right pieces. It seemed like you're winning a bunch of games, and you get yourself all excited thinking that your team is going to get over the hump. And then lo and behold, it comes crashing down right in front of you and just makes you feel some type of way. It's very frustrating. So to me, the only thing Sean Payton could have done outside of maybe bringing some more championships and Lombardi trophies to New Orleans is stay long enough to be able to have a win countless division titles, but not win anything of any significance and just make people tired. Like, yeah, we winning, but we aren't reaching the ultimate goal, which is a Super Bowl. The big payback said TJ, I hope we draft Jeremiah Love. Yeah, we'll get into that in just a minute. We're going to talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl, and we'll talk about some draft prospects as well. We'll get into that just a little bit later. Says, that's right, TJ. They just weren't around back in the day when fans were just used to us only winning 4 or 5 games a season, man. Them days was rough. Yeah, some Saints fans, as of right now, they're experiencing that. And look, I get it. I ain't trying to big brother nobody. I just want to put this thing into perspective. Sometimes we don't even realize that, we are victims of our own success. Sometimes we become spoiled because of the benefits that we have. It's almost like a child, right? Like your parents probably grew up, in poverty-stricken conditions, right? They work themselves to a spot where they can make money and become successful in life, and then they have kids, and you can tell the kids about, when I was growing up, we was on Section 8, or when I grew up, we used to stand in line, for food stamps. We used to, get the EBT card. Like, they don't know what you're talking about, because they never really experienced that, right? So they have a different perspective. So I can understand why some Saints fans out there have the perspective that they have, because when some Saints fans out there that are older talk about the bad old days, so to speak, it's kind of like, your grandparents trying to tell you what's going on back in their day. Like, you can't really relate to that, but you can relate to the prosperity that the Saints had, and now you don't have that anymore, right? It's like going from, as Bobby Abel said, the penthouse to the outhouse, right? It's a situation that you in your lifetime haven't really been privy to. So, I get it. But at the end of the day, I have nothing but love for Sean Payton, man. I wish him all the success in the world. And, I want to see the Saints succeed too, because look, there's no, like, just like Sean Payton was able to go to Denver and turn them around in a 2.5-year span, why can't Kellen Moore do the same damn thing, right? I mean, it all started from an opportunity. Sean Payton, like, nobody really knew who he was, like, unless you were like really knee deep in a football game, but nobody really knew who Sean Payton was. Sean Payton wasn't a household name as like a Ben Johnson highly touted coach. Like, Sean Payton, like, people had to, go at the time, they even had Wikipedia, like, really had to do research on, like, who the heck this Sean Payton guy was. But, all it takes is an opportunity. And why can't Kellen Moore be that type of coach for the New Orleans Saints? We see these young coaches that are in the league right now finding success. We see Mike McDonald, head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, in 2 years taking them to the Super Bowl, right? Mike Vrabel, who is not a new coach, but he's a new coach to the New England Patriots, in 1 year has taken them to the Super Bowl. So it's not like the New Orleans Saints don't have a good infrastructure. Like, you have some questionable decisions from the front office, but it seems as if, there's a partnership that's going on between coach and organization as of right now. And if it can continue to be like that, the trust factor will continue to grow, and maybe the decisions will become better for the New Orleans Saints. Maybe the developmental process will be able to help and benefit the New Orleans Saints in the future. But look, we all miss 12, 13, 14 win seasons, but it started somewhere, right? I mean, we know about the 7-9, 8-8 seasons for the Saints. Wasn't always, double-digit wins every single year. But, I believe that, that Kellen Moore and the coaching staff can possibly, get things together. Hopefully, Let's see. I'm glad Sean Payton lost when he got suspended for the whole season. He was never the same, and he just got tired of the NFL politics with Roger Goodell. Well, I don't know if he was never the same. I don't want to say that, because, okay, so when he got suspended back in 2012, like, it was very rough for the New Orleans Saints during that time, because we know they lost the draft picks, and The defense couldn't stop a nosebleed during that time. But, credit to Sean Payton. Like he completely wiped out the coaching staff. And that was hard for him to do because a lot of those guys were with him when he first got to New Orleans in 06. And he went out there and, got rid of some of those guys who were, questionable at their jobs and got guys that were known for developing players. And, the front office went out there and got Jeff Ireland and got some other guys in the front office that can evaluate and scout talent. And we know that from 2017 to, when Drew Brees retired in 2021, the New Orleans Saints were one of the top teams in the league. You can make an argument that the first half was the second half of Sean Payton's coaching career was better than the first part. The only difference is that Sean Payton actually won a Super Bowl during that first wave. The second wave, they won a hell of a lot of games, man. But, sometimes when you don't reach that ultimate goal, sometimes the winning, the prosperity kind of slides through the cracks. It's almost like a really talented quarterback who never won nothing, right? Over the course of time, you have other quarterbacks that come along and they find success. And then all of a sudden, that quarterback that was really talented during that time kind of falls down the pecking order, right? And that's just kind of what it is. But the Saints, post Bountygate, they won a whole lot of games. I want to say they probably won more games post Bountygate than they did pre Bountygate. So I mean, he did a good job, man. He did a good job. They just had some unfortunate situations that happened. Of course, the Minneapolis Miracle, and of course the Nolan no call, and and then the fumble. By Jared Cook, just some very unfortunate situations that happened for the Saints, but really good football teams and could have easily won a Super Bowl or appeared in a Super Bowl in any one of those instances I just named. Let's see. Say what you want to say. Patrick Payton dipped on us. Love him, but he dipped. Yeah, and I think that's something that people feel, is unforgivable. But yeah, we can, like I said, but at the end of the day, Sean Payton is the most winningest coach in Saints history. And the reason why Saints fans feel the Saints have a chance of winning again. He showed you what winning looks like, and he showed you that the New Orleans Saints, the lowly New Orleans Saints, can actually be a team that's legit. So, like I said, for that, you got to appreciate him for that. Despite the fact that, you may feel like he dipped out when the team needed him most. And in, some cases, I completely understand that. But, I mean, we got to move on from that. And speaking of moving on, let's go ahead and move on and talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl. Of course, this week is the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. And it's always an exciting time. I have learned, as a reporter and, somebody that covered the New Orleans Saints and, Coastal Carolina out here in Myrtle Beach. This is a fun time, man. When you see these players out here and they're doing everything that they can in order for them to be drafted, in order to get eyes on them, they go through this process, and it is a long process, man. And, it's a fun time for me because, college football, we have a tendency, unless we like a diehard fan of a team that maybe, struggled a little bit, maybe we went to the university. But for the most part, college football focuses on the same usual suspects, right? The Michigan, Ohio States, the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Georgias, right? I'm not even mentioning Indiana and Miami because they're kind of like outliers as of right now, because they haven't really won anything in a long time. I want to say last time Miami was in the championship game, I think Willis McGahee, tore everything he had in that game versus Ohio State back in 2003. And I can't remember Indiana ever winning nothing in football. I mean, that's just the truth. So they're kind of like outliers. But it's a fun time because you have so many different players that come from schools that slide through the cracks. People don't really know that much about them, but they showcase some really good skills. And you see them start to climb up the draft board. You start to see whispers. And, as somebody that has been to the combine a few times, you see people just get all excited, and you see how a guy can change his draft stock overnight. And the Senior Bowl can do that because we know that there are very talented players that come from the Senior Bowl. Like Tyler Shuck, everybody's excited about him. He came to the Saints, through the Senior Bowl. A lot of hype behind Tyler Shuck and his quarterback skills and his abilities, and people felt like he was pro ready. It came from him showcasing his skills at the Senior Bowl. Not the game, but the practices. Those are the things that people pay attention to, right? Cam Jordan, another guy, a long time Saint great, came through the Senior Bowl, right? I mean, Demario Davis, like so many guys have gotten opportunities because of the Senior Bowl and showcasing their skills. And this could be a great opportunity for a lot of players. And we know that the New Orleans Saints, they like to pick from guys that attend the Senior Bowl. We know that in the last, not the last three, but 2 out of the last 3 Senior Bowl MVPs end up becoming New Orleans Saints players, right? Jake Haener was a Senior Bowl MVP. The Saints drafted him in the 4th round. Spencer Rattler was a Senior Bowl MVP. Saints drafted him in the 5th round. So great opportunity for a lot of players. And, there's a few guys that are going to be attending the Senior Bowl that I think that would be really good fits for the New Orleans Saints. And, it all depends on where you want to go with this. I've read the pulse of the Who Dat Nation, and it just seems like every member of the Who Dat Nation has a different perspective. Now, as of late, you got a nice sample size of Saints fans out there that have hooked on to Jeremiah Love. He's not going to be in the Senior Bowl, but he's a guy that Saints fans want to see the Saints draft with the 8th pick, the running back out of Notre Dame. But just because you draft a guy like Jeremiah Love, that doesn't mean that one of these guys in the Senior Bowl won't be there when you're picking in some of these later rounds. And, you also had the receiver conversation. Do the Saints need to go after a big body receiver? Did Chris Olave show you enough to show that he is that number one? It puts your mind at ease that you've seen Devon Bailey out there making those contested catches. And, you see all these different things going on. But do the New Orleans Saints need to add a wide receiver? I mean, I think we all can agree they need to add an offensive lineman on the interior. So maybe even 2 of them. Well, not maybe. You need to add 2 of them. So this might come in the form of the Senior Bowl. So here's a few guys that I feel like would be really good picks. I wrote them down here. And I think that they would be good picks for the New Orleans Saints that will be attending the Senior Bowl. And these are players that I want you to keep a lookout for because, I took some downtime and I've really been watching some film and really been watching some guys that have been flying under the radar. I've been looking at, maybe some of the starts that they had. How long have they been playing, at a university? How many college football games they have been a part of. Those are the type of things that I've been checking for. And, of course, the individuals that are going to be attending the Senior Bowl. So here's the first one, all right? His name is Cage Casey. He comes out of Boise State. He's an interior lineman, and he's a guy that I feel like would be a really good fit. He was very instrumental in the success that Ashton Jeanty had when he had that monster season at Boise State. This was a guy that, didn't allow many sacks. He was a guy that was really good at run blocking. The pass blocking needs to improve a little bit, but not to a point where it should be alarming, right? It's a developmental process, which a lot of young players have to go through. I feel like he'll probably be there probably in the 3rd or the 4th round for the New Orleans Saints. And, he has a really good size about him, man. So I think that this is a guy that the Saints definitely can take a look at. He's 6'5", 310 pounds. His arm length is about 33 to 34. And like I said, he can play offensive tackle as well as guard. So he's a guy that played a little bit of both. So you can line him up outside if somebody was to go down. But he's a really good run blocker, and I think that he'll be prepared, man. Played in a lot of college football games, and like I said, he was very instrumental in helping Ashton Jeanty reach some of those goals that he had as he had that Heisman Trophy type year. All right, so that's the first guy, Cage Casey. So be on the lookout for him. Go ahead. I'm going to keep it on offense. Wide receiver Kevin Coleman out of Missouri. He's not a big body receiver, right? He's 5'11", 185 pounds, but I just think that the New Orleans Saints need a wide receiver that can get those yards after the catch, right? He can create separation, and, he can get you that rack, right? Something that I think that the New Orleans Saints need from their wide receivers. Too many, pass catchers, catch the ball, fall down on the ground, right? You need somebody that's going to be able to create that separation. You can line him up in the slot. He can get busy in the slot and, just separate himself from the defender. So I think that this would be a good fit for New Orleans Saints. And also, he's a guy that, that can, you can put out there in the return game. He can help you out in that regard as well. Like I said, they need that fast guy that can get that separation and get those yards after the catch. Deion Burks is another guy out of Oklahoma. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds, runs about a 4.4. He has like a 36-inch vertical leap. He's a speed guy. He has inside and outside flexibility. But this is something that I feel like Jalen Pope can actually add. But if the New Orleans Saints wanted to maybe add someone kind of similar to the skill set of a Jalen Pope, I think that Deion Burks can actually be one of those players. On the defensive side of the football, I'll just keep it right there. I want to see what you all are saying. And feel free, if you see somebody or have seen someone that you feel like would be a good fit for the Saints, feel free to put it in the comments. Or if you are watching this show when it's all said and done, feel free to put it down in the comments below. But in real time, for those that are watching this live, feel free to do so. Kellen Moore and the staff like guys who had a lot of reps or was captains at a big university. Look, you want guys that know what they're doing, right? You want number one, you want players that are coachable, right? Are they coachable? You want guys that have been through, a lot of football games. And, I don't understand why people are making it seem like that's a knock on a player, right? Like, oh, he played in a bunch of games. Like, that's great. That's great if they played in a lot of games. That means that they have had a lot of ups and downs. They probably went through the ebbs and flows of the season, and they have become better versions of themselves based on the reps and experience that they have gained through all of those football games. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you see a lot of the players that the Saints drafted, they were thrust into the lineup and they were able to find a groove as time went on because they had a lot of experience. They played in a lot of football games, and the moment wasn't too big for them. They got better every single week. You didn't see too many of the players making the same mistakes over and over again. It almost became uncharacteristic when they did. So going after some of these players that have played a lot of football might be beneficial. And it only pretty much reconfirms the whole entire theory when you watch the Indiana Hoosiers win a national championship when they probably, what was the average age, like 24, 25 years old? So that was a bunch of players that have played a lot of football in college. So, that's not a knock. I don't know how that became a knock. Guys playing a bunch of games in college. I think that's a great thing. To me, I think that because of the NIL deal, I think that now you have players that aren't so quick to try to leave college. I think you're going to see much better pro prospects in the future because, like I said, you have the NIL deal. Now these guys can feel comfortable and be kids and enjoy college life a little bit longer without having to hurry up and be a grown-up right away. So I got to take care of mom. I got to take care of daddy. I got to take care of grandma and grandpa, right? I can still do things to help them and also develop to be the very best I can be so I can be a generational talent. I can be in the NFL longer than people would anticipate, and I can be a contributor on a team for a long time. So I don't see what the big deal is about that. That's a very good point, Devon. That's a great point that the Saints are, trying to find players like that. And I just don't know how that just became like the scarlet letter for college players that oh, they've been in college 4 and 5 years. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that you're seeing players play a little better, and guys who have come into the league, they've played a lot of college football. They come into the NFL and it seems like they're more ready than some of these guys that are 19, 20 years old that, oh, you're going to come out, you're going to be the number one overall, and they struggle. TJ, I like that kid, Dennis Sutton. I'm gonna have to take a look at him. I'm gonna take a look at him and try to see what I think about him. We had him. He's in Seattle now. We talking about Rasheed Shaheed, man. I'm happy for Rasheed Shaheed. And look, I look. This isn't a surprise to me that Rasheed Shaheed has found the success he did in Seattle. I mean, Rasheed Shaheed is doing what he has been doing in New Orleans. He's doing that in Seattle. And look, I still don't feel like the Saints lost in the trade because Rasheed Shaheed was an undrafted guy coming out of Weber State, and the New Orleans Saints got a 4 and a 6 for him. To me, they won. I think both teams won. The Saints can add 2 players that can contribute to this team if they play their cards right. And Rasheed Shaheed gets the opportunity to play in a freaking Super Bowl, and Seattle has a game changer. So it's win. It's win-win to me. I think that as crazy as this sounds, and if you don't want to agree, then fine. I think the New Orleans Saints got better as a team when they traded Rasheed Shaheed, and it's not his fault. I just think that Rasheed Shaheed was, a guy that the Saints used as the down the field threat. But I also feel like it kind of prohibit Chris Olave from really reaching in his bag. Because when Rasheed Shaheed ended up getting traded, who was the down the field threat? Who did you see like really, getting down the field, getting behind defenders and start making plays and start going over 100 yards or flirting with 100 yards? Excuse me. It was Chris Olave. So to me, I feel like the offense got a little bit more explosive. Guys, rose to the occasion, took advantage of the opportunities. If Rasheed Shaheed was still in New Orleans, Saints fans would still be wondering, is Devon Vele worth the Saints making that trade with Denver? And when Rasheed Shaheed left and Devon Vele came in, everybody started to see like, dang, man, well, maybe it wasn't a bad trade after all. And it also helped other guys be able to step up and make plays too. You start seeing Jawan Johnson start making more plays. Once again, Chris Olave, making plays. Yeah, you started to see guys that you weren't sure about. It made you feel more confident about those players. I don't even feel the same way about the wide receiver room for the New Orleans Saints as I did pre-Rasheed Shaheed trade. Like, I seen these players make plays. So to me, there's a level of comfortability with those players. I don't feel like, all hope is lost. All they got is Chris Olave and nobody else, right? I'm interested to see what Trey Palmer can do with a Tyler Shuck. I'm interested to see what Jalen Poe can do with a Tyler Shuck. I think that those 2 wide receivers are extremely underrated, and I think that the chemistry that Jalen Poe and Tyler Shuck can have could be something that is extremely beneficial to the Saints offense. Seeing those guys hang out and fishing together and all that kind of stuff, they are creating a rapport. And I have a wait and see approach because I just think that a lot of questions were answered by a few of the wide receivers when Rasheed Shaheed got traded. So to me, I think it was win-win. You hate to see Rasheed Shaheed go, and nothing Rasheed Shaheed has done in a Seattle uniform I'm shocked about. I mean, the pass that he caught in the NFC Championship game to kind of, create a spark early in that game, I'm not surprised. Like, how many times have we seen him get behind a defender and race to the end zone, right, and win the race? How many times have we seen Rasheed Shaheed return a punt or a kick return for a touchdown? We've seen that on countless occasions. It feels like, it's like somebody driving your car, right? You got this nice fancy, car. You put all the bells and whistles in it and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden it's like, I think I'm gonna just get something else. You know, I'm gonna go ahead and try to trade this joint in. Then all of a sudden, like somebody just started riding around in a car that you had, and it's like, hey, man, you know, you start thinking about, you know, that was me in that car, right? You think about all of the alterations that you made. Like you think about all those things. But at the end of the day, man, I'm happy for Rasheed Shaheed, happy that this man is out there winning, and I'm happy that he's in the Super Bowl. And I think that Saints fans should be happy about him. I haven't heard anybody say anything bad about Rasheed Shaheed. I haven't heard anybody say anything negative about the young man. As a matter of fact, you know, I seen a lot of members of the media talk about how kind he was, and you know, and they're happy for him. So, man, I'm happy for Rasheed Shaheed, and I think that both teams won that trade. TJ, if we're drafting 2 wide receivers potentially, what does that mean for Polk and Palmer? I think Palmer is a steal. Well, I don't think they're going to draft 2 wide receivers. Those are a few guys. I don't know if you when you came in, Keen Arthur, but the 2 wide receivers, you know, that I mentioned, Tim Keenan, not Tim Keenan, Deion Burks and Kevin Coleman Jr. Those are 2 guys that I feel like kind of fits that mold, right? But I don't think the Saints are going to draft 2 wide receivers. I just don't. We're going to stop right there, and I'm going to go ahead and focus on the defensive side of football. We know that things are going to kind of change. I know that the Saints were used to this stereotypical defensive lineman, 6'6", 6'7", long wingspan, right? You know, like, you know, a hybrid type guy, you know, super athletic, you know, that's what they were kind of used to. But, you know, in that 3-4 defense, like, you need guys that can be versatile, right? You need guys that's going to be able to move around. And then on top of that, you need that big nose tackle in the middle, right? You know, there's a guy on the Saints team that's going to be a free agent, Nate Shepard. You know, you got to wonder, are the Saints going to bring him back? I mean, I think he had a solid season, but if not, you know, you're wondering what Vernon Broughton can do in year 2. The Saints lost him early, but high expectations for Vernon Broughton. Can you bring somebody else in? And Tim Keenan, the third from Alabama, is a really good defensive lineman. He's 6'2", 320 pounds. He's really strong, man. Elite strength. You know, he can be that guy that can help the Saints out, you know, in that run support, be able to plug up the middle, you know, not allow these teams just to wreak havoc running up the middle on the New Orleans Saints. So that can be a guy that the New Orleans Saints could possibly look at, a big nose tackle type guy that just can be, you know, a force. And he's a guy that's super athletic for his size and has brute strength. So I think that would be a good fit. And we'll keep it in Alabama. And, you know, another guy that I feel like the Saints can look at is LT Overton. He's a 6'5", 280 pounds. You know, he's a guy that's pretty versatile, man. He's a guy that can help you when it comes to stopping a run. You know, to me, I think he can get a little bit better when it comes to rushing a passer, but he's, to me, going to be one of those guys that can be like a late round pick for the New Orleans Saints. Like I say, he's a rotational guy, and, you know, he's pretty versatile as well. For the linebacker position, I got Nnamdi Obazar. He comes from TCU. He's 6 feet, 240 pounds, runs about a 4.5, 4.6, and he's a guy that can be a sideline guy. You know, I like his motor. He plays with a lot of energy. He was a leader on that defense at TCU, and I just think that the New Orleans Saints can use a guy like this, man. He's more of like a hybrid guy. He can be a linebacker. He can be that guy. He can put his hand on the ground. He can rush the passer and get home. You know, he has that speed that can make things difficult for an offensive lineman and be able to get to the quarterback if need be, and also someone that can probably help out on special teams. And also a safety, will keep it at TCU. I like Bud Clark as well. Now, this is a guy that has a, you know, wide frame, big, long wingspans. He's 6'2", 195 pounds. And look, he's a versatile guy. He can play safety. He's not afraid to tackle. He's a thumper there. But you also can line him up in a nickel. And this is a big guy. Like I said, he's 6'2". He can make it difficult for some of those smaller, you know, wide receivers, you know, because of his size. And he can keep up with them, right? Because he has really good length. So that's a player that I think the Saints could possibly look at if, let's just say, for example, Alontae Taylor wants to test free agency, feels like he can go out here and maybe go to another team. What do the New Orleans Saints do? You can draft a guy that can play in the nickel and be able to be versatile as well, kind of similar to the skill set of an Alontae Taylor. So those are a few players on defense I think the Saints can look at the Senior Bowl. Those are some players that I'm going to be on the lookout for and seeing how they are faring at the Senior Bowl. But I just think that, the New Orleans Saints, if you are, wondering what you're going to do on the defensive line, or you're going to keep some guys, or you're going to allow some guys to test free agency, as well as, the status of Alontae Taylor, maybe you want to draft somebody, that's, kind of a hybrid guy, somebody that can be versatile, just like Alontae Taylor was, right? And if you can find somebody like that, if you can find a guy like Bud Clark that can come in and, be versatile for you on a rookie deal, that is a plus. ATJ, what do you think about the 6'6" wide receiver the Saints signed, Damian Alford? We are also looking at the running back out of Wake Forest, Demond Claiborne. Know anything about him? Well, I'm pretty familiar with him, man. Pretty steady guy. Probably a really good special teams player. Not somebody that I just think that just gonna move heaven and earth for the New Orleans Saints. Probably just somebody that they probably want to bring in, just kind of kick the tires on. But Alford, he's a guy that's really good at contested catches. For those that don't know, he was the number 1 pick in the CFL draft. I know some people are like, oh man, it's Canadian football, but we have seen some really good, talented defensive players and players in general come from the Canadian Football League. So, the tape that I've seen, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but if you need that contested catch, you need somebody that can win that 50-50 ball. He has shown that he can do that. And he can separate a little bit. Like, he's not slow. He's not the fastest wide receiver that you're going to see, but he can get separation. So I think that, he can be a red zone guy if the Saints want to use him that way. He's a guy that, if something was to happen to Devon Bailey, the Saints probably would thrust him into the lineup if everything pans out for him. And he has a level of confidence about himself that I like, right? I think that he's a smart player. He's a guy that, he needs some work, of course, but I think that being that 50-50 ball contested catch wide receiver that the Saints need, he can be that if he develops the right way. We'll add help in our secondary in case Alontae walks. Yeah, look, I know. Look, the way that Alontae Taylor was talking as if he wants to test free agency, he was talking as if, like, man, I did my part. Now it's time for a team to do their part and compensate me. And I have no problem with that. I don't think any Saints fan, I don't think any fan should have an issue with guys trying to understand and knowing their worth. Alontae Taylor, to me, solid member of the secondary. Do I feel like the New Orleans Saints organization will miss him as a player? Probably, in some cases. I mean, somebody that's been around the team, a little bit of a fan favorite in the locker room as well. Became like a leader in the secondary, for some of the younger guys. But do I feel like the New Orleans Saints can find somebody that can, pick up where Alontae Taylor left off if he decides to go to another team? Absolutely. There's still some things in Alontae's game, and he would admit that he needs to improve. But if he decides that he wants to go to a team that is going to pay him handsomely, I don't have an issue with that, and I don't think anybody else should. So you got to be prepared for that if that was to happen. So hopefully the New Orleans Saints are looking at that position. There's some other slot corners out there that can maybe come in to be able to help out. And there's some guys that you can actually draft that can be able to help you out as well. I kind of became a fan of Pines out of Indiana, man. That guy got a little bit of some honey badgers, some Tyrann Mathieu in him, man. He's a short guy, not the tallest cornerback, that we ever seen. I think he's about 5'8" or 5'9", but he has some dog in him, man. And maybe, you put him in a nickel going up against some of them slot guys, he can make a name for himself. I know people start talking about size, but look, the way that this guy plays, like, you wouldn't even think that he's 5'8" or 5'9". So that's somebody maybe teams may shy away from due to his size. Teams seem to shy away from certain cornerbacks with certain measurables, but if New Orleans Saints want to take a flyer on a guy, and he's a player that kind of fits that mold for the New Orleans Saints, somebody that's a leader, somebody that shows heart, somebody that played in a lot of college football games. That might be someone that they pay attention to. Got to get one or two DBs, maybe one in the draft and another as an undrafted free agent. Well, you can never have too many DBs, man. It's a tough position to play. And, they take a lot of bumps, right? They take a lot of bumps. They take a lot of bruises. So as many as you can possibly have in your wheelhouse, the better. I'm going to take a few more, and then we're going to go ahead and get up out of here. I'm going to stroll up a little bit because I know I missed a few people. Says, I said Rasheed was a one-trick pony, and we got draft capital for him, and I was criticized for it. If you look at the receiving yards after the trade, he didn't go over 100 yards because he didn't have to. He didn't have to, DJ. That just wasn't his wheelhouse. Rasheed Shaheed is a complimentary guy. All right. I mean, he's not a number one receiver. And, in cases, sometimes he looked like he was the number one receiver, but he's not that. I mean, and Seattle has a number one receiver. They got a number two receiver. So Rasheed Shaheed can basically do what he's been doing. And not to mention, there's a guy who I'm very high on in Seattle, and Saints fans seeing him, Torrey Horton. He came out of Colorado State. He got hurt during the season, and they lost him for the year. But he's a guy that I feel like could be that number two guy. Like Cooper Kupp, I don't know what's going to happen with him. I don't know the status of Cooper Kupp. I know he's not the same Cooper Kupp we've seen when he was with the Rams. Maybe this could be his swan song, right? Like ride off into the sunset if Seattle can end up winning the Super Bowl. And that's the opportunity for Torrey Horton to step up. But look, you need players like Rasheed Shaheed. Like Rasheed Shaheed is the modern day Devin Hester. And look, that may be blasphemous to some people, but that guy is explosive. He is a game changer. Excuse me. He's a guy that can change the game. And, like when you have guys like that, I mean, you're going to pay him. So, I mean, like Devin Hester wasn't a great wide receiver. When he was at Miami, he was a beast. But in the NFL, like Devin Hester wasn't no really good wide receiver. Devin Hester was a great special teams player. He's in the Hall of Fame right now because of what he did on special teams. So to say that, that as a knock, that's not a knock on Rasheed Shaheed. If Rasheed Shaheed can carve out a lane for himself and return kicks throughout his entire career, guess what? People are going to pay him. Because if you have a guy that can flip the field, if you have a guy that can create momentum, like there's a few games that Seattle wouldn't have won if it wasn't for Rasheed Shaheed. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't even got the number one seed. Because if you saw the game on Thursday night, the game Seattle versus the Rams were winning that game by 2 touchdowns in Seattle. And then all of a sudden you had Rasheed Shaheed return a punt, and that was the momentum swing. We seen a couple weeks ago Rasheed Shaheed open the game. Well, we didn't see because most of us were still watching the Buffalo game. But we see highlights of Rasheed Shaheed returning a kick for a touchdown on an opening kickoff. The guy is electric. And, you can carve out a lane for yourself. So, there's not a knock on Rasheed Shaheed. Like, they already got a number one guy. They got a number two guy. He can be that number three guy. If he can stretch the field, get behind the defense, like, I'll give you a couple plays. If you don't think Rasheed Shaheed matters, They did a fake jet sweep. I want to say it was maybe like a second down. They ran this play twice. They did a jet sweep. They rolled Rasheed Shaheed from right to left, and eyes just started to shift because they didn't want Sam Darnold to hand the ball off to Rasheed Shaheed. Instead, they hand the ball off to Kenny Walker. Kenny Walker got about 12, 13 yards on the play. Then they did it again. I want to say Kenny Walker got about 9 or 10 yards on the play. So his explosiveness his ability to to create separation is a plus for a team. So just because you're not going over 100 yards receiving, don't mean that you're not an X factor for a team. Like Taysom Hill didn't go over 100 yards for the Saints, but the way that they used him, he was a game wrecker. And Rasheed Shaheed is a game wrecker. I agree, Pines most definitely got it. Yeah, he got some dog in him, man. He got some dog. With a player like Shaheed, he levels the playing field. He makes it hard to double your number one. Exactly. Because you play man coverage on him, he's going to get right behind you, score a touchdown. And, like I said, every time he was out there, eyes had to be focused on him because of his big play ability to be able to get separation. And that opened up opportunity for Jackson Smith-Njigba because, that man was wide open on a lot of those plays. And how do you allow the best wide receiver on the field, on the Seattle Seahawks team to be able to get that type of separation? But I want to say thank you all for checking out this episode of the State of the Saints podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Previous episodes, they are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor FM. Follow me on X at TJAYJones8, and we'll be back at it, giving you information pertaining to the Senior Bowl. We'll keep our eye on some of the players that are going to be taking part in the Senior Bowl, who had a good day, who needs some work. We're going to get you all covered right here on the State of the Saints podcast. Till next time, all I got to say is,